1,000, a little over 1,000 people on site today. It did start receiving detainees on August 1st. We heard the Texas 23 Representative Tony Gonzalez go on Face the Nation last week. He said there were 100,000 detainees on site starting August 1st. He obviously misspoke. I think he meant 100 detainees on site. That's not true. As I mentioned, John Cornyn saying this was a hard-sided facility. That's not true. John Cornyn saying that this was only for criminals or people with final orders of removal. That's not true. So the information that Republican colleagues have been giving the public, not true. I think that's really important to say off the bat. So as I mentioned, Rep. Tony Gonzalez told Face the Nation, 100,000 folks on site August 1st, misspoke, think he meant 100 people. No, there were 4 people on site on August 1st. And then it slowly, over the course of some days and weeks, ramped up to 25 people, then 50 people, all in the effort to open yesterday, basically become operational yesterday with 1,000 people on site. The ICE and the administration have announced this will continue to grow. You know, it's gonna go from 1,000 ultimately to probably about 5,000 people. And when you go on site, and by the way, we advocated for tours for local leaders, tours for local media, so that there can be absolute complete transparency. We are hopeful that that will happen. That has to go up the chain, obviously. Those decisions are not made here at the local level. Those decisions are made by headquarters and by the administration. But our view, as has been with every facility, whether it was the emergency intake facility under Joe Biden, whether it was the processing facilities under Trump, then Biden, and now Trump, our belief, my view personally, is the more transparent that the federal government can be, the better. So we will continue to push on full transparency and access by local media, by local leaders, and by local clergy who would like to go into the facility. I had a conversation with the bishop last week about hopefully the bishop and others gaining access. But when you go into the facility, which I hope you all will have an opportunity at some point to, you would see it is really massive. It is a huge facility that takes a lot of power to run. And it takes a lot of people. As you all have heard, a contractor was awarded the bid for this. The vast majority of employees on site are contractual employees. I am very concerned that there are not enough ICE personnel who have been trained by the federal government and have done this for a living for their full career, as many oversight, that within the Appropriations Committee. When you have a facility this operating to detain as many people as they are detaining now, and then hope to detain this, I have always been very deeply uncomfortable and opposed to privately run facilities. I think it's far too easy for standards to slip when there are private facilities. I think private facilities far too frequently are operating with a profit margin in mind as opposed to a governmental facility. So I do not like private facilities, especially for detention, period. But if they are going to exist, they have to and should have significant federal oversight, which is one of the reasons why I was so eager to get in. there is a very highly sophisticated medical unit, which obviously we should absolutely advocate for high quality medical care. But I know this was a complaint from people on the right for a long time about immigrants receiving, medical care under the Biden administration. This is a pretty highly sophisticated medical care unit, including trauma bays, including significant screenings, which again is, if we're going to have people in detention, we should provide the medical and behavioral health necessary to ensure that we are treating people, that the federal government is treating people humanely. Something that I raised directly with the leadership, the medical leadership, which is hired by the prime contractor, is I am really concerned about the number of medical professionals being poached from the local community to come work at this facility. El Paso already does not have enough doctors, enough nurses, enough healthcare providers for our population. But when you operate basically a small city, you're operating like a mini hospital or a very large sophisticated clinic. And when the pool of those professionals is coming from a community that has worked really hard to provide access to health care, which, by the way, I'm very concerned because of the cuts to Medicaid, what that will do to some of our providers locally. I am really concerned about the poaching of medical professionals from El Paso. It means less access for El Pasoans to medical professionals because the pool is so limited. The medical director did assure me that if he sees an issue, he will pull in medical providers from the outside, from outside communities. But I did stress, as a proponent for healthcare for our community, that they not be poaching our folks who are working at our local hospitals and our local clinics, because our community needs those folks. The facility is not yet on the grid. It's being operated fully with generators. But once it is on the grid, this is a really large facility. And as we have seen El Paso Electric, try to keep up with the demand, especially as our summers get hotter, as winters get colder because of extreme heat. This is, again, competing for limited resources. I think that is really important for me to stress. We have limited resources in our community, and this is definitely a strain on local resources, whether they be medical resources or utility resources, as I've mentioned. Let's talk about the population. The population, as I said, a little over 1,000 people. We heard Senator John Cornyn say, this is going to be people who don't need access to due process because they are on final removal orders. Nope, not true. In fact, there are folks inside the facility who have recently been apprehended, maybe even here at the border, or apprehended as far away as Miami or as far away as LA, in enforcement operations that ICE is conducting inside the U.S. As we have learned through national media and through some of the statistics, those folks, some of them have been here for 20 years, working in agriculture, essentially part of the United States workforce in meat packing plants in other areas. So, nope. Donald Trump's mass deportation plan is not targeting the worst of the worst. Nope, this is not just for people with final orders. And so I stress that because members of Congress have an obligation to provide accurate information to the public. And I am very dismayed that there are colleagues who are putting out information that is not accurate. We can all debate the merits of policy. We can all debate the merits of the mass deportation plan, but facts and truth should not be debatable. And so my team and I hold ourselves to a very high standard. If we don't have the information, let us try to get it. We will get as much as we can to share as much as we can. We will not just repeat talking points. We will not just give you information that the administration wants to be given. We will give you facts. And when we don't know it, we will tell you we don't know, or we're going to try to get it. There is still an opportunity for folks inside this facility, as there are in all the other facilities, to ask for self-deportation. And in fact, in the El Paso area, almost half of people who are in custody have asked for self-deportation. And just remember, you can't self-deport or participate in self-deportation if you have a criminal record. You also can't participate in self-deportation if you have final removal orders. So if what we know is half of folks in detention, including here, are participating in self-deportation because they don't have criminal records, because they don't have final orders, and this is voluntary departure, that tells you, that none of these folks have a criminal record. Do some folks in there have a criminal record? Some folks in the various facilities have a criminal record, undoubtedly. But that is very different from what the administration has talked about these facilities being for the worst of the worst, or these, or their focus being on hardened criminals. That is not the case. In fact, when you look at the number of folks being detained nationally and deported nationally, fewer than 10% have serious felonies or a serious criminal record. Why do I mention this? Again, number one, it's important to tell the truth about what the federal government is doing. And so I offer that as a check to what the administration has been feeding the public. I also want to say this. In a community like ours, we know how challenging it can be to have high numbers of immigrants arriving at our southern border, at our nation's front door. And there are certainly resources, intense amounts of resources that go to processing that population. And so there is a cost associated with that as well. But what members of Congress like me have been trying to do is create common sense immigration reform so that we acknowledge that especially folks who've been here for 10 years, for 20 years, who are, aside from entering the country without documents, have otherwise been law-abiding residents of this country, have otherwise been important members of our local economies and our national economies, folks who deserve a shot at accessing legal pathways. There's a better way to do this. And as we see our economy continue to be on shaky ground, as we see inflation continue to tick up, as we see tariffs take an impact on costs, as we see the administration not keep its promise to lower the costs for every American and to fix the economy on day one, we're seeing a worsening economy. And when you add mass deportation into the mix, that will undoubtedly have an impact on the national economy, on the state economy. We're hearing from farmers, we're hearing from restaurant organizations, we're hearing from all sorts of business interests that we do not have the workforce necessary to be as competitive a nation as we are, and deporting massive numbers of people who otherwise could and should qualify for legal pathways if Congress would pass the Dignity Act. This is another hit on our national economy. And you don't have to take my word for it. Look at what economists are writing. Look at the most recent economic news out of Texas. The Texas economy is actually shrinking, in part because of deportations. So while our economy is on shaky ground and struggling, federal taxpayers are paying $1.25 billion just for this one facility. Just this one. The one big beautiful bill, almost 50 billion US taxpayer dollars will go just to private detention facilities. You know that those private corporations are going to get richer. You know that their shareholders will be enriched as well. Again, to what end? When we could come together, as Republicans and Democrats did with the Dignity Act, and bring forward solutions so that we can spend $1 billion in El Paso on health care, on child care, on weatherizing homes, on helping a community that works really, really hard. And instead what we're getting is benefits ripped away, health care ripped away, our deficit exploded, all to fund this. So with that, let me do a little bit in Spanish, and then we'll open up for Q&A. I'm going to be briefer in Spanish, and then we can do one-on-ones in Spanish. I just want you all to have some Spanish at the podium, okay? But we'll do one-on-ones with the Spanish stations. Mi equipo y yo acabamos de visitar la detención aquí en la calle Montana, que es parte de Fort Bliss, pero la operación es bajo ICE. Y unos detalles importantes para mí que la comunidad sepa. Número uno, más de $1,000 millones solamente aquí. Nos podemos imaginar qué podemos hacer como gobierno federal si la administración de Donald Trump quisiera invertir ese dinero en nuestra gente en la comunidad en vez de su plan de deportaciones. Otro detalle, hay 1,000 personas, pero esta área va a crecer y en unos meses vamos a ver 5,000 personas. Estas personas, la administración de Donald Trump nos dijo que se iba a enfocar en los criminales, en los peor de los peor de inmigrantes. Eso no es cierto. Aquí adentro hay gente que a lo mejor tiene más de una década en los Estados Unidos. No sabemos esos detalles específicamente, pero son parte del esfuerzo de ICE en cada comunidad en el país, las operaciones donde están arrestando a gente en sus trabajos, en donde sea, en cada comunidad. Y están deportados o van a estar deportados a sus países. En vez de enfocarse la administración en reducir los costos, que es lo que nos prometió, está invirtiendo dinero no solamente aquí en este lugar, pero este lugar, tenemos corporaciones que están operando estos lugares, corporaciones que se enfocan en algo diferente, en cuánto dinero pueden hacer. Y es importante también saber que los republicanos que han hablado sobre East Montana, por ejemplo, el representante Tony González le dijo a Face the Nation, un programa hace una semana, que había 100 personas aquí desde el primer día de agosto. Eso no es cierto. Empezaron con 4 y luego 25 y luego 50 y ayer 1,000 personas. El senador Cornyn nos dijo que las personas aquí adentro, todos ya su progreso en el sistema de inmigración era final y ya estaban listos para deportación. Eso tampoco es cierto. Hay gente aquí que apenas el Border Patrol acaba de recoger. Entonces, hay poblaciones diferentes. Es importante para mí y mi oficina y mi equipo. Si no tenemos información, les vamos a decir, les vamos a avisar. Es importante que cada colega mía, por favor, diga la verdad. Y si no tienen la información, es importante decir, no tenemos la información. De nosotros siempre van a oír la información que nosotros estamos recibiendo directamente del gobierno federal. All right, with that, I'm happy to open it up for questions. Hi.
I want to ask, how will this actually operate with the whole deportation scheme? Are you going to see an increase here at Fort Bliss and the national deportation flights? Or will this stay stepping stone?
Yeah. Let me wait for the truck. And see all of that, the resources to operate this facility. It's very, very resource intensive. That's why it's so expensive. So we are seeing deportation flights from the El Paso International Airport. So far, they're not using bigs. That's not to say that won't happen in the future. So it's going to be, we will keep you posted. We're going to keep asking these questions. But so far, there's just been the use of ICE Air. And this is a hub for Central America and Mexico. So that's the focus for us. There are different hubs across the country for ICE. But things could change pretty rapidly. So we are going to stay in contact with folks because we do know that what is the status quo today might change next week. Yeah, I mean, as you see, all of these resources in and out, that's all funded as part of the $1.24 billion. I did not. So we are going to come back. There is what was not a very clear process for requesting access to detainees, but we are going to solidify what that process is so that we can talk to detainees. That is a priority of mine. I have always spoken to detainees, even during the first Trump administration, without asking for permission in advance. So we're going to get on the record what the process is, and we will follow the process. When we do, I will let you know.
What exactly did you see? Can you detail what you saw? You just told us it's very big, but what?
Yeah. Have you all been inside the other soft-sided facilities run by CBP, for example, like the EHF? If you've been through the EHF, which is in far northeast El Paso, which, by the way, is still operational, TBD, whether that will shut down or not. These are very, very expensive facilities to run. But it's very similar. It's essentially a tent, a tent that is reinforced. So there's hard flooring. There's walls that do not go all the way up to the top, but there are doors to create privacy for the rooms. There's cameras everywhere. There's pods where the detainees are held with communal space where they eat their meals. They get 3 meals a day. A very sophisticated tracking system linked to a bracelet that is scanned. So, when they eat, they get scanned. When they go to the doctor, they get scanned. So it's a very sophisticated technological system. But it is, and it's supposed to withstand hurricane gust winds, which, sometimes we get in El Paso. So, they've assured us that it's, really solid site, but it is still a soft-sided facility.
Congresswoman, the $1.24 billion, does that also provide for construction and the staffing of it, and for how many years?
Yeah, it's the construction and staffing, and I think potentially, before I tell you, let me find out. We'll circle back with you, Cindy.
A quick follow-up on what you were talking about, Senator Cornyn.
It depends on what facility you're comparing it to. There are some outdated private prisons. Without knowing directly from the senator what he's talking about, this is very similar to the EHF. If you toured the EHF in far northeast El Paso, it's as I described. It's a massive tent facility with hard floors, with walls that don't quite go up to the top, a lot of workforce, a lot of contracted employees, for sure. I would definitely say it's humane. I would agree with him on that. As I mentioned, the amount of medical care that they receive is exceptional. And they have not yet constructed the site for access to legal counsel, but it should be up, they assured us, later this week. The detainees through a pad, like an iPad-ish thing, have access to LexisNexis, have access to be able to connect with their attorney. They can connect to information about nonprofits. So this, there will still be access to legal representation. And I do hope that the legal community also gets a tour of the facility. We are going to try to have a roundtable, as we did early on in the administration, with local stakeholders, where ICE can engage directly with local stakeholders, the county judge, the county attorney, the mayor, some members of city council and commissioners court, school district folks, whoever we can governmentally, so that they can also address some questions, and hopefully we can include legal community, but we'll see.
One last one to follow. What access do they have to families or contacting families?
Yeah. That's a good question. It's the tablet also. Yeah, it's the phone calls through those tablets.
They're supposed to have visitation, but it's not set up yet.
Yeah, okay. So the visitation component not set up yet. We did get, just to describe so that you know where some of these folks are coming from, my office got outreach this weekend from a lawyer who reached out about a detainee who had been moved from the so-called alligator Alcatraz here to this facility, and we confirmed he is here.
You just answered a lot of my questions, but a couple things. I know you couldn't talk to the detainees. Were you able to see any of them? And what did you see? They say that single adults, are there men and women, or just men?
Good question. Right now, just men. And when there is a plan for women to be on site, that's TBD. Women detainees are generally a smaller population we've seen over the years. Normally, when there are women who've been detained, they're part of either a family unit or, have children with them, which raises a whole host of other issues. There's only one federal detention center for families, and that's in Dilley, that's in Texas. And so, we obviously are very concerned about families, pregnant women, women with U.S. citizen children, but none of those individuals are on site today, but they will be at some point in the future.
And when you say they're saying single adults, doesn't mean that they don't have a family.
Correct.
Just like individuals are being housed.
That's correct. That means one person detainee with or without family. Even though we couldn't speak to detainees, they ran the gamut in age. I saw elderly men in there. My assumption, I couldn't talk to them, but had I spoken with them, I would have asked them, how long have you been in the U.S. and where were you living? Because it's highly unlikely that these older gentlemen just made the crossing. And young people, a lot, some young men, a lot of working age folks.